The reviews are in! With early access to Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 launching tomorrow, and the worldwide release happening on the 9th, the embargo is finally lifted for the game journalists and independent people and groups that got early copies to give their 2 cents about the game. Today, I decided to round up some of them and talk about what they're saying the game is doing right, while also outlining what they say goes wrong with Space Marine 2. So let's jump right into it. Space Marine 2 has come out to almost universal praise from many game journalists thus far, usually ranging from reviews like 8s from IGN's and GameSpot's reviews, to 10 out of 10 masterpieces as some places like FandomWire reviewed it as. Most of the reviews from major critics so far are around somewhere in between though, by bolstering still very high regards for the game at around the 9 out of 10 score overall. On screen, I will show you a roundup from other major critics from the scores they gave as well. Now, as you may notice as some of these reviews come across the screen, there is one in particular that sticks out like a sore thumb. That sore thumb goes by the name of PC Gamer, saying the game currently plays as a 60 out of 100 from their current review. Now, before we get into this outlier review, I do want to go ahead and kind of surmise all of the reviews and let you know everything about the game that seems to be praised by all the other critics that brought out their reviews so far. Overall, it seems like the gameplay is very fun, but with the campaign being short and only having like 6 operations currently, it makes the game feel a little light when it comes to PvE content. It's a fair question on replayability for sure. For raw gameplay, including its core gameplay loop, gameplay mechanics, and fun while actually playing the game, this seems like a 9 out of 10 game at worst. That is only seemingly brought down by lack of content on launch for things they were able to touch on in their review copies in terms of PvE. However, as a caveat, the official roadmap features a lot of cool updates coming in the game, including the heavily desired Horde mode, new classes to play as, new maps and modes for PvP, along with promises of new operations and a higher difficulty coming for all current operations and the new ones as they release, coming at later dates through major seasonal updates. And if you want full coverage on everything coming from the roadmap that they released, I have you more than covered, as I already have a video detailing everything that is coming in the first 4 seasons, so if you're interested in finding out about all that content that's coming, definitely make sure to check that video out, as it'll also be linked in the description below. Overall, this sounds fantastic. Seemingly the game sounds super fun to actually play and get your hands on, but sadly the launch content will more than likely have us all fiending for more and ravenous for some of the seasonal content to finally come out. The reviews so far have me super excited on what I'm hearing, and I'm not even that big on taking reviews from game journalists to heart anymore. Back in the day, I used to always look up movie or game reviews to dictate if I would buy a product, as I didn't really grow up with a lot of money to spend on my hobbies or interests growing up, so I really wanted to make sure that I was getting a bang for whatever I spent my money on. Now I kind of pull all the review sites together, kind of like a Rotten Tomatoes approach, as I'm kind of doing in this video, and take them all with a grain of salt, and really wait for the audience or YouTuber reviews, because for the most part, unless they are directly sponsored, they don't necessarily have to say the game is good to keep in the company's good graces for future review copies or access to games before launch. But so far, from what I've personally seen of the gameplay in the trailers and gameplay showcases, and the passion we know they have for the game and the franchise as a whole from the Tim Willits interview that we covered in another video, if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it, as it gives insight into the passion that they had for making this game the best that it could be. Not only that, but just look at this tweet from one of the developers and their reaction to a majority of the reviews coming out for their game being positive. It's just so wholesome. I just know this is going to be an awesome game. Now let's get back to the ugly stepchild that is the PC Gamer review. This review score, just up front, it's pretty shocking, and truly is an outlier, with everyone else at least leading with saying the game was fun, and that they saw a couple of areas of improvement in having more content and fixing some bugs they experienced. Now keep in mind, PC Gamer just recently gave Star Wars Outlaw a 73 out of 100. And gave this a 60 out of 100, and with what I've heard from both games and seen from both games, I just can't fathom as to why. To say the least, I was immensely curious as to why they labeled this game as a 6 out of 10, so of course, I went straight to their site to check out their review. Just as a briefing on what to expect, I scrolled down to the very bottom to see their final thoughts on why they labeled it as a 6 out of 10, and the sentence reads as follows. Fans of Warhammer 40k will be delighted by the spectacle and authenticity, but ultimately disappointed by messy action and unengaging multiplayer. Immediately I thought to myself, okay, maybe some bugs marred their gameplay experience, maybe the horde mechanic that they're bringing in from their development from World War Z didn't fit right for the Tyranid swarms, and maybe the multiplayer maps felt too big and actionless for the 4v4 setting in Eternal War. Because if that's the case, I could totally see those things being needed to be called out and fixed. After reading the review, even from the first couple of sentences, it's apparent that the reviewer just doesn't like the gameplay loop, which is fine and totally valid. They even point out some critiques that before even getting the game in my hands myself, I know are completely right. Seeing the same animations for executions over and over would eventually get repetitive. They don't like to be forced to do executions to regain armor, which is a staple in the gameplay to stay alive, which of course is one of the core gameplay loops mentioned before. And of course, dealing with AI teammates is almost never optimal when it comes to co-op shooters or team-based games. They list some problems that I more or less just don't personally hate about the game as well. They felt the parry system felt bad since some hits were not being outlined like the others would be with glowing red or blue enemies, and then went on to state that because of all of these mechanics that they don't like for taking down enemies and staying healthy, that was why the gameplay's combat felt messy, as they surmise later on when they give their overall score. To a degree, I understand. If you don't like the gameplay loop and you feel like they all feel like individual pieces that don't mesh, and that being the core mechanic, it makes sense that you feel the gameplay as messy. So overall, I wasn't really upset that this person was marking down their review for the game in that regard. You can't force someone to like a gameplay loop they don't like, and certain types of games aren't for everyone, and this review was just stating that opinion. This essentially stems into every core argument that they have about the game, but in particular in their operations mode as well. Except for the other completely valid criticism of it having too few missions, and another one they state about once you see the cinematics and events one time in the operation mode, it gets pretty stale to play over and over for leveling and progression, which is another point that I could see as well. But personally, to call it disengaging multiplayer because it's more of a gameplay loop you don't like at all, I feel like is going a little bit too far. Because you're summing it up as multiplayer overall is disengaging, as they do in their brief sentence as to why it's 60 out of 100, altogether while also outlining earlier on in their article that PvP isn't accounted for at all in the review because the player pool was far too small to get a number of matches in before the review was needed to be pushed out. It just feels a little bit disingenuous to sum up all of multiplayer into just the operations mode. Overall, I don't think for anyone that's a fan of what they've seen so far, or excited for this game at all, has to really worry too much about this negative review from the game. Although they do point out some stuff everyone has pointed out in their other reviews from other game journalists as lacking parts of the game, with its weak point in some repetitiveness, AI for teammates being a bit rough, and along with obviously wishing the game had more PvE content to consume without having to jump into PvP to get a more diverse experience or wait for the roadmap to officially launch with its additional seasons. At the end of the day, with everything laid out on the table from these early reviews, I'm still excited to get my hands on this game, I'm still ready to sink hours into this franchise, and more than willing to support the passionate creators that made the game. Let me know what you guys think about the reviews that have been put out so far, what you personally think of everything being said about the game right before early access, and if you're still going to be picking up the game at all. Also guys, it would mean a ton to me if you would scroll down and hit that like button and make it glow as we reach for our goal of 25 likes on this video. While you're down there, consider subscribing as we will be covering more Space Marine content as it releases, other AAA games throughout the year, hilarious content, and more. Also really quick as we reach the end of the video here, huge announcement for the channel. We have new membership tiers and perks available for the channel if you're interested in going an extra step and supporting the channel while getting some cool perks in return. consider becoming a member and get the opportunity to be listed at the end of videos, just like this one. As always though, your support through your viewership, liking, and subscribing is always greatly appreciated and helps me out tremendously against the tyrannid threat that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!